We're back for part 2 with Peter Faulding, the owner and CEO of Specialist Group International. Peter will take us inside the world of forensic search and recovery. We discuss the methods and tools that SGI uses to assist law enforcement in searching for evidence in human remains on land and in water. Peter and I also discuss SGI's involvement in the investigation into Scottish serial killer Peter Tobin. Peter shares the methods and techniques used in the forensic search of Tobin's property and how SGI found and recovered key evidence that contributed to Tobin's conviction and sentencing. If you haven't watched last week's episode with Dr. Lee Meller, please make sure to check it out. In that episode, Doc explained the crimes and psychology of Peter Tobin and the unsolved serial murders of Bible John. Now, here we are back with Peter Faulding, a world-leading confined space rescue and forensic search specialist. What would you say, obviously, that you can share is the craziest call that you've ever gotten?
Blimey.
I'm sure there's many, but is there any particular one that really stands out?
Well, I got a crazy one for a crime job. I mean, that was a crazy one where I got a phone call and they said, Peter's XX from South Wales, from the police, and we've got a problem. We're looking for a shotgun cartridge down a mine shaft. We go, okay, it's 750 feet deep. I said, okay, that's fine. Okay, possible. He said, there's one more problem. It's flooded. So I've gone, okay. Well, funny enough, we had all the kit. So we've got a camera that we just purchased from the US from Fisher's, which had 1,000 feet of cable on it. And we had a mini ROV as well, a very small remote operated vehicle. Those who don't know what an ROV is, it's a small robot, and that had 1,000 feet of cable on it as well. So I said, yep, we can do that. Really? So we went along on the first day, and it was an old murder. It was the Helen and Megan Twos murders, the Lanharan mine shaft. So it was an old disused mine. And what had happened, it had gone on to Crime Watch, what they call Crime Watch, putting on a program in the UK that would bring back the memories of people to say, do you remember, have you got any, does this come to memory about this crime, what happened then? And anyway, this engineer who worked for the mine said, I remember on the day that I went to the mine, bear in mind it had all been flattened, there was nothing there, just a cap to a mine shaft. And it had a lid for environmental monitoring. So he would lower a monitor, connect his systems up to test the groundwater in the mine shaft for environmental damage. And he said, I remember on that day that the padlock had been broken off on that particular day. Now, they were found shot dead with a shotgun in their house, next door to the house in the barn. They found a hot, warm cup of tea there. And it was a really interesting job. Anyway, I put the ROV down. The team felt the cables. I flew the ROV down the mine shaft. We lowered it down. And when we got to the bottom, it was just a pan of flat silt. And I had a camera above it looking at the ROV with 2 monitors in our mobile command unit. And what I did, I steered the ROV around, and the fans would move the sand on the bottom that would keep the ROV. And I went round and I'm fanning away, and suddenly on this monitor came up the word game, and it was a shotgun cartridge, because I obviously knew about shotgun cartridges, and it said game on it. And I held it there with the lights. I went to the SIO called Trevor Evans. He was the detective chief inspector. And I called him over and said, Trevor, is this what you're looking for? And he couldn't believe it. And that was the shotgun cartridge. So I found the shotgun cartridge on the first day. And then he said, we want to get some funding to bring you back because there are other items missing. We went back a couple of weeks later with funding, and now we found down the mine shaft a jacket that was actually hanging. So where it got dropped down, it floated down in the depths and landed on the support beams of the mine shaft about 18 metres down. And what we did, got South Wales Police, and they put their underwater search unit in down the mine shaft through what they call the adit, and they recovered the jacket. Now, while we were there, this was so strange. Two kids come over and said, "Hey, mister, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, you better speak to the chief inspector." And he said, "We're looking for a shotgun, lads. You haven't found one, have you?" He said, "Yeah, my brother found a pair of shotgun barrels the other week on the rubbish tip over there." Now, when they say a rubbish tip, it was undergrowth, as in the undergrowth. Where are they now? Well, he's painted them pink and put them on the wall in his bedroom. Right, go and get them. And then as they walked off, he said, "No, stop, don't go and get them. We'll come with you." And they went back to this gazelle. They brought back a pair of pink shotgun barrels, twin 12 bore. Never found the stock for it, but that went off to the forensic lab. But that was the most oddest thing. And what I'll say to people, never disregard what the public say, because they may have key evidence. And we were working on the Jenna Baldwin case in Wales, where the public, we were asking them whether there was any tunnels or drains in the woods, that we don't know the area, but they do, because they play there. And it's so important. Never, that I'm a great believer in talking to the public and going, you haven't seen a tunnel, you haven't seen this, you haven't seen that, because it's always the kids who will know where every hole is in that wood. And they, it's so important not to just disregard what the public say. And you could have the smallest piece of evidence come in. It's a bit like YouTubers. A lot of people run these YouTubers down going, you don't know what they're talking about. But a lot of them are very intelligent people. And they can, as long as they don't get be quite useful, highlighting information that other people may not have thought about. The police don't know everything. Sometimes you get some people who are, they got weird backgrounds, and they might just pick up a small snippet of information that can solve that crime. And that was the beauty of Crime Watch when it used to be in, and Police 5 we used to have, where members of the public would ring in and and help solve the crime.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Armchair detectives or web sleuths, whatever you like to call them. They, I mean, it's a lot of eyes, and it's a lot of people doing online research. And as long as you can filter it and be objective and pick out the pieces, it absolutely can help you. One place where bodies get disposed of in Australia are actually wombat holes. So people use those kind of like to conceal. Do you find in doing that forensic search for human remains that there's places, specific kind of places that offenders will use to conceal a body or evidence?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Water's always a big one, but it's always the people always talk about buried under the patios, but you say a bat, a wombat hole. But Mark, I didn't work on this case, but Mark was telling me one day about a job where a small girl's body was put into a badger set, down in a badger set. So these people are again, they can be anywhere. I mean, in the UK, they look at, there was 50 meters from a road or 100 meters. I never take much notice of that. Always go a lot further in, because it depends on the fitness of the individual. But buryings, obviously, burning, you have a fair amount of that in the States. But and always, I worked on one in London, which is an interesting one in Ealing, and I was brought in by the DCI to search this house, and it was for a case of identity theft. So it was in Ealing, and when I got there, I had a very unfriendly forensic archaeologist who didn't want to talk to me. Said, "I don't need you here. I can deal with this." And I said, "Okay, well, we've just been brought in, and we just want to search the garden. There's nothing here." And I said, "Well, okay, well, we're still going to search it anyway." So I run the ground radar over the garden, and I got a ping straight away. I could see it was metal, not a body, it was metal. Anyway, we were just going to dig it up. She'd know, I'll dig it up, and it turned out to be a buried crowbar and a hammer. So that was found, and then we went indoors, and then we started doing the floors, and then the police searchers who were there then said, I said, we need to get under the floors of the bedroom to search it. We've searched it. And I said, well, we're here to do it. And the detective had disappeared by this time. I said, well, we'd like to do it. No, you're not doing it. We've searched it. Anyway, a few months later, it went to court. We didn't search under the floors. And they asked the guy in court, where's the body? It's buried under the bedroom floor. And the body was actually buried under the bedroom floor in the soil, and it got missed. So again, it depends on who's doing the job, and also attitudes and egos sometimes. And that you'll see me using ground radar in this particular picture. It's that was the search for Nicola Payne. So I was brought in by the family to do that, with a guy called Mark Williams Thomas to assist the family. It was ongoing. I mean, we spent a lot of time also working alongside West Midlands Police on that. But the ground radar for me for buried items is, I live on a farm, so I've got alpacas. So when the alpacas die, I bury the alpacas and I use them for test graves to look at grave decompression. And I train forensic students as well. So they come up to my land to looking for ground sign on when you're carrying out searches. Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to find anything. And ground radar, there's not many people who use, especially police don't have it in the UK. I think the Met might have one, but apart from that, there's very few people who carry this piece of equipment. They do for construction, but in the forensic world, apart from the odd archaeologist team, there's not many people who carry. So it can be vital. And we done a job in Boreham Wood, where a gentleman was buried under the rear path. And I was brought in again by Mark Harrison to conduct a complete search of the house and the gardens. And the nosy neighbour kept saying, I believe that he's buried his dad under the path, etc., in the garden. So I searched, found a buried dog. Part of the other land, I found three buried handguns and 200 rounds of ammunition. The guy was an ex-Polish soldier, so he wasn't a terrorist or nothing. He was just an ex-Polish soldier who brought trophies home from the war. And then on day 5, I found him buried under the rear path. Now, the dogs had been running around all week, the search dogs, but they couldn't scent because he was actually buried under the path, so they couldn't find it. If the radar hadn't have been brought in that day, then the body would never have been found. It would still be there.
So explain to us why the dogs may not have picked it up.
Well, a dog needs to scent, and I was working with dogs again the other week, actually, with a guy called Martin Grime, who's worked on many cases. Martin, dogs will need to break the scent. So when I worked on the Tobin case, for example, the dog handler will come in, he will stick a probe in the ground, and he will push it as far as he can down to, because bodies are generally reasonably shallow, depends, but he'll probe the ground and he'll put a number of vent holes in the ground. He'll then leave it for 30 minutes. People have different parameters, but normally 30 minutes. They will then bring the dog in, and the dog will sniff each hole. And if there's a scent of human remains there, he will indicate by either wagging his tail or crouching down, and the handler will give him the ball. But the scent, if the scent it can't be detected, i.e. through it's years old, or it doesn't matter, months old. If the dog can't smell the scent because it's not coming up through the soil, and on this occasion he'd actually put a path, I wrote about this in the book, over the top of the actual of the body, and he was concealed under the path. I mean, incredible job, really, what he did, and he concealed his father under the thing. There was nothing suspicious about it in the end, believe it or not. He just loved his father, and he wanted to be buried in the garden near his dad. It was a very sad story, but without that ground radar, he wouldn't have been found. So that's where you come in and you bring this type of gear. And I had the same with the drugs cache as well, and that would never have been found without the the ground radar. So it's got its many uses. And again, the ground radar, you need to understand how to use it. You need the hours on it. You know, we
Right.
worked for Kate Prout murder down in Gloucestershire. They couldn't find her. The SIO Julia Marogna brought me in, and I went down there, and I walked in, and it was like a bomb site. They're digging everywhere up. I said, "Well, where was the?" Because apparently he had buried his wife in front of the pheasant pens, which were no longer there. And I said, "Where are they? We took them down this morning." Okay, they need to go back because that's the intelligence we got. So got the post book back and said, well, it's going to be in front. No, we've had ground radar already go over it this morning. We had a company in to do it. I said, well, okay, we need to, I don't care about that. And what Chris did, one of my colleagues, we got a metal detector. Chris run the metal detector before we had the radar over it. And straight away, he's picked up. Anyway, subsequently from that, it ended up to be the woman's wrist with the gold watch on it. But the
Hmm.
point is, with ground radar, this was like sand. So he buried her in a sand type substance. Over the months, the ground, bit like a sandcastle on a beach. So if you dig a sandcastle on the beach in sand, fill it, leave it open, the tide will wash it in and there'll be no trace on the surface. Whereas if you dig clay, there will be a trace of buried sticks and all sorts of things going in. But where the sand had all joined back together again, where it rained, there was not a mark, no ground sign on the surface whatsoever. So that's the difference. And if you don't understand these rules when you're doing searching, things get missed. She would have been missed. She wouldn't have been found that day. So again, I brought me in, used the expertise, and then we found the body. Really, really important.
One thing I love about working with search personnel such as yourself is I find that search and rescue operators they apply a lot of the similar techniques I apply in geographic profiling. They've learned missing, lost person, offender behavior.
Yeah.
They apply some of the windthropping techniques. When you're brought in to search an area, let's just hypothetically say 50 acres,
Yeah.
and law enforcement had said, we believe a body is buried here. How do you decide where to search with the GPR? And because it must take some time to cover a wide area.
Yeah, I think one of the most important thing I always look at is what did the murderer do as a job? What was his background? Has he got a
Mm.
military background? Was he a farmer? Because if you think about, if you've got 50 acres, which is not normally in private land, but you've got a 50-acre farm and the farmer's the suspect, what has he got access to? Now, the farmer's got access to huge digging machines that he could bring a JCB in and dig a 20-foot hole in the middle of a field. He could dig the hole out, throw the body in, fill the hole back in, and then run a plough over the field. And now you've got a completely flat field which has just been ploughed. There's no ground sign.
Mm-hmm.
The only ground sign will happen after a few weeks when the ground starts to join back together, as it starts, a bit like a grave, a cemetery, it'll start to sink a bit, and then they redress the grave. And if he's got time to keep going back to do it, it'd be very difficult to find. So you're just we use, obviously we got drones, we got the helicopter, it's a matter of how far could this person, has he got access to a vehicle to carry the body across that land? Probably not if it's in public land. So is there a lay-by nearby? There's one lay-by here, there's one lay-by there. So then, as you know from geographic profiling, you take a lay-by, he's probably walked into the woods carrying the body. How strong is this person? What did the victim weigh? How far could he physically carry that body? Is it wrapped? Has he got a shovel with him? Where's he put the shovel? Has he taken the shovel with him, taken it away? So there's so many things to look at, but often, you just need to piece everything together and go on your instinct. But it's like you said, it's understanding the windthropping. It's very easy to get blasé about these things. But I say the helicopter for us, or the drone, is so useful to do an aerial view of what's going on. When we searched for April Jones down in Wales, I was flying the helicopter, and could go up in above the forest. We could look all round the place. And I remember flying on that, and we were going over the hills, and I saw a drain cover missing on a footpath of a lid of a drain cover not far from the Cunliffe, where people went missing. And I landed the helicopter on the track, and I approached this drain so slowly because I thought, here we go, this poor little girl could be in this drain. Lucky enough, she wasn't. Someone had removed the lid and just left it off on a track. But you're looking at possible deposition site here, which wouldn't be seen from the ground, but from above, you've got a clear marker. So you use all the tools what were in the toolbox, really, Douglas.
Getting back to the water recovery, Peter, are there any cases where a body has been lost in water, or a homicide has taken place and law enforcement hasn't been able to find that body, and that you've been brought in to recover that body?
Yeah, I think there's many, but one case that stands out for me is probably Damien Tudge. Damien Tudge went missing one night. He went to a nightclub with his wife down in the West Country, and he had an argument with his wife. They had a few drinks, and he ended up hitting her, which is not normal for him. So he regretted that. He walked off and he said, I can't take this anymore. There was a final text sent to her, and he just disappeared, couldn't be found. So 18 months later, after many searches, I'm being part of the database. I was brought in as a specialist to review the case with a senior investigating officer. And I sat with the detectives in the room and I said, well, let's look at all the evidence. We got cell site analysis that it takes him over the River Severn near Bewdley. We got cell site pins in that area. There's no number plate pings on the ANPR system. There's no passports. There's no bank accounts being touched. So clearly he's deceased, but his phone went dead over the river. And I said, well, he's probably going to be in the river. He said, well, the Environment Agency have said if he was in the river, the residue from the oil and the petrol from the vehicle would show up on our monitoring system, in the water monitoring. And also the river has been searched 12 times using a special sonar. I said, well, okay, what sonar have you got in there? And he said, well, we've got a local rescue team have got specialist sonar. I said, well, let's get them on the phone and let's talk to them. Yeah, so I spoke to the gentleman. I said, it's Peter. He said, well, we've got a sonar, but it's not a sonar. It's a fish finder. Okay. I said, I said, that's all I need to know. And I said, thanks for all your hard work, because these volunteers have put so much time and effort into searching this river in their own time, but they just didn't have the piece of kit that we had. So I said, let us search it. So we came down. Well, they wanted me to search it. So we went down, and within 10 minutes, I found one car. Within another 5-10 minutes, I found another car. We dived on the first one, and Aidan went in, pulled the number plate, and it has been a stolen vehicle. And then the second one, Rick dived. I went down first to try and video. And I remember swimming around in the dark. I couldn't see anything in the water. It was so dark that I felt around the windows, and the windows were all sealed up. As you know, I wrote about this case in my book. And I then came up. Rick then went in to dive. Rick's a former military diver, and he went in and he got the number plate, and he peeled the number plate off, ripped it off, and we confirmed that it was Damien Tudge's car. That was a good thing. And from my look around, it confirmed that the windows were shut as well. We knew the windows were sealed up. I went down with a camera initially, but we couldn't see anything. So we knew it was highly likely that Damien was in the car and maybe had committed suicide. So what we did, we got a crane, got the road closed off. We got a crane into Rick and Aidan went in, secured chains to the wheels. They closed the road off, and the car was brought out of the water and landed gently on the road. And then the crime scene investigators come in, photographed it. We rolled the car over, and then lo and behold, in the back, Damien's body was there. And it's so interesting because as the car was pulled out of the water, and I present on this on my forensic talks, to the police, and as the car comes out, we're looking for a blue car. Now, if we had had an underwater camera and we looked down, this car was now brown because the paint had all been taken off. You see? So if
Right.
we had an underwater car, say, no, there's a brown car down there, but not a blue car we're looking for. So that was the difference, and again, if we had taken notice, the Environment Agency say this car's now, there's no residue, so we're not going to search the river, he would never have been found.
Right.
So again, it's using your knowledge to go, well, I'm going to ignore the Environment Agency, I'm going to ignore the other sonar, I'm going to search for myself with a team, and then we'll get the results, and that's what we did.
When you enter a site, do you start your own search from scratch, or do you take into account what searches have been done and proceed from there, or do you completely start over with your own search?
We like to start over, and it's proven time and time again that we found what we're looking for when we've started ourselves. I mean, a lot of the time we get brought in to do the initial search, and other times we get brought in after others have already searched, where they are, I won't say fail, that's the wrong word to say, but maybe they don't have the expertise or the specialist equipment that we've got to actually get the fine detail. And again, it's a bit like firing weapons. We done a search up in Staffordshire. We were looking for a weapon on a series of armed robberies, and it had already been searched. So we've got very powerful underwater metal detectors. The diver went in and recovered the gun, which was a revolver, which was under about that much silt, about 6 inches of silt, and he found the weapon. So again, it's having, like I say with all these searches, Doug, it's about having bringing the right people in at the right time with the right equipment and the right expertise.
Sure.
Because if you don't put all them together as a jigsaw, you can have the best equipment in the world, but if you can't operate it, you're not going to find what you're looking for. And if you haven't got the experience to take you and ask questions, it's all about knowledge and experience, and it's so interesting. It's you just need to know what you're doing with the equipment, and it's not about people saying, it's about qualifications. Forget I'm not interested in bits of qualifications on paper. People use that all the time. It's about experience, what you're doing, and it's proven time and time again now. You've got to have a track record to get results, not a weekend. That's the way I look at it.
And I'm curious, do you mind kind of explaining for us what the difference is between the side scan sonar and a good fish finder? Like, how big a difference is that? What are you going to find with a fish finder?
Well, I'm not a fisherman, but I've worked with fish finders. I mean, we tried to locate a sunken a dummy on the bottom with a fish finder, and it was there and it was marked, and we couldn't find anything. The sonar's different. That's sending a signal down, looking for fish mid-water, looking down, and it's been misused a lot of the time because they say, oh, we got a sonar. It's not the piece of kit. A side scan sonar it sends a sound wave out either side of the toe fish. You've got a dead area under the fish. That's why you have to overlap your searches. And it'll send the sound wave out and it'll hit a target. The return will come back to the computer and it will give you a live screen image of what's going on. If there's a stone laying on the bottom, there's the rocks, there's twigs, there's branches, it will give you a nice clear outline of them images. It's not a photograph, it's a computer image of them, but a body looks like a body. Now, you can have a body where it's laying straight. It can be laying straight down with its arms and legs alongside. And looking at that, if you found like a straight object, you still need to put a diver in, because that could be a body with its arms tied up or
Mhm.
whatever. But normally a body, a drowning victim will, as you see in my book, there's a drowning victim, they will be in there with its arms and legs out, and you can see the head, you can see the arms, you can see sometimes they're in a fetal position where they've curled up, where their legs, often they'll be laying on their back with their hands gripping something, as you know, with a death grip. So it just varies. But the side scan sonar will cover, if we're looking for a body, it'll go out. Ideally, I like to use 10 meters or 20 meters to 20 meters swathe, which is the either side of the towfish, to look for a body. Then once I've got a precise location, I'll drop a shot float in. Then I use that shot float to it's got a marker on the end, so I can bring it closer to the body. So when I put a diver in, I can drop the diver straight onto the target and
Hmm.
recover. So it's a very, very accurate piece of equipment. And the good thing about side scan, it allows me to measure the length of the arms, the legs. So if I'm looking for someone who's 6 foot, I can measure the length of the arms, the legs, and say this is highly likely, because this is an anomaly here that needs diving straight away.
Right.
Or most of the time, I can see a body as a body. I don't need to go, I think it might be. It's a body. I can see the body. We put the diver in and we recover it. I mean, normally most victims we're looking for are recovered within 2 hours, and we
Hmm.
have 100% hit rate across the southeast. We get called by fire and rescue or the police. We go in, we recover the body,
Hmm.
and it does never go on for days. It's done the same day.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's the death grip?
The death grip is basically when people die. I mean, they obviously have a lot of thoughts going through their mind, and they tend to like grab a pair of glasses or something, or read. So we had my first drowning victim I ever dealt with was in a water ski lake in Cambridgeshire, and he had weed in his hand, so he gripped the weed trying to pull himself out of the weed, and then he drowned. And whilst we got him out the water, he's holding weed in each
Mhm.
hand. It's pretty horrendous, really, and a lot of the time they got their eyes open looking at you, so it's not very pleasant.
So some of these indicators.
Yeah. Indicators is one. Yeah, was they dead before they hit the water? Because normally if they're
Right.
dead before they hit their hands are open and they've just been thrown in the water. So it's again, with the right experience, we recovered two bodies out of the National Dive Centre from 70 metres of water. But there's a joint operation with Avon and Somerset South Wales Police, and that they were just going to get a local pathologist to do the post-mortem. And I said, no, you need a diving doctor. You've got to get a diving doctor to look at this, because they understand decompression injuries. A normal
Mhm.
pathologist is not going to understand this. So they got one brought down from on the East Coast, who's a specialist consultant who deals with barometric, barotrauma and things like that, which was
Hmm.
really important.
Interesting. And
Mm.
and with these indicators, it could help you figure out whether, I mean, the cause of death, right? Whether it was an accident or whether
Yeah.
there was, whether there was criminal behavior there, and a
It's really
homicide or
important. Yeah.
or an unaliving, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like bruising on bodies. Bruising just doesn't occur on bodies. It's there for a reason. Has that person been pushed or hit before they hit the water? And they might have bruises over the body, which again, not my area of expertise, but the pathologist will look at and go, something's not quite right here.
Sure.
Something needs to look, and the water and the lungs, and have they breathed in water? Have they, have they been pushed into the water and they've drowned by pushing, or have they been murdered before they hit the water? But that's down to the medical teams, not us.
Right. What about the Scott Wilkinson
Scott
homicide?
Wilkinson, yeah, that was a sad case. So Scott Wilkinson it was called the Wharton murders, and that picture of me is recovering the weapon, and I think it's um, Scott Wilkinson was murdered in Surrey. He was bludgeoned to death by three individuals, vile individuals. He was just fishing, minding his own business, fishing on an island in Walton on the Thames, and we got a emergency call to go and assist the police with a search for weapons and other paraphernalia. He was camping on the island, and he was all set up for his just enjoying his fishing trip. Anyway, I walked around the woods, looked around at different things, and I noticed that the fishing rod holder that was holding his fishing rods had been drilled in by a drill, and the drill was missing. So somewhere, someone has either taken the drill or done something with it. And anyway, I said highly likely that if they've run out of the woods with a weapon, they've gone along the path and they've probably thrown it into the water. So we put a search pattern in. We searched around the island, shallow water. Then we put the divers in. I was I think it was the second to dive that day. And I spent 2 hours and 10 minutes underwater. And it was on the final sweep, as you see from the picture, I located that knife. So it was a fingertip search along the bottom, just feeling around in the dark with my fingers, going slowly, 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 and then suddenly I've got the knife. And the knife, he wasn't stabbed, but that was rushed away for urgent DNA analysis as well. There was no DNA found on it, but it was a vital evidence, and it was a real result for Surrey Police, and they got convictions. And it was a success story, a very sad case, but we located the evidence we were looking for.
With those underwater searches, especially like this one, using just your fingertips.
Yeah.
How do you know, or how do you make sure that you search every inch? I mean, if you miss 1 inch, you're going to miss that knife.
Yeah, exactly. It's done on a line, and we overlap the line, and you just got a line under your arm, and you're literally just. It's down to, again, this is down to the individual searching. If you're thorough, I mean, maybe others could miss something. I don't know, but we also carry a lightweight underwater metal detector with us as well. So I didn't use one on that particular day because often sometimes they can get in the way. But we've got a range of underwater metal detectors what we can use as well. So if we know there's a weapon there, we'll go back in. But we've never missed so far. So that was a good find.
And that case just seems so. I mean, every murder is pointless, but I mean, the two individuals that got convicted of murder, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, were teenagers, right? 18 and 19, and then a third 25-year-old was convicted of manslaughter. But it almost just seems like 3 young men got caught up in the moment. I mean, I don't know what their motive was, but I mean, and then they were bragging about it after. It's so absolutely pointless.
And it was a particularly good job done by Surrey Police, in getting these individuals, tracking them down. It was DCI Paddy Mayers and his team, and they got them, and they got convicted. The problem is the justice system also a lot of the time lets us down, where the judge will give them a sentence, and then the parole board a few years later, these vile individuals come out of jail.
Right.
Let out early. It's something what the world suffers with probably, but it's not good for the families.
No, it isn't. We have some pretty lenient sentences sometimes in Canada too.
Yep. It's got to change.
The next one was the Nigel Chapman. And I'll let you get more into it, but Nigel Chapman, from what I've read, the article you sent me, so he was 62 years old from Horley.
Yes, that's correct.
And he was murdered by his friend Jennifer Lloyd on November 9th, 2020.
Yeah, I think it was a particularly sad one. This, I mean, he was disabled, and the we were called in. The picture on the left isn't the Nigel Chapman. That's a body recovery job. Just I'll say that that's a different job there.
Okay.
On that one, I'll let you deal with that. So I'll go back. So yeah, it was a particularly nasty job. So she was his carer, She befriended him. And we got called by the police to an urgent search that morning, say we've got a murder going on, and we need you, the team, to put divers in the water to actually search this shallow stream area. So we've got things called bathoscopes on board, which are like an upturned bucket with a glass bottom. So I went down with the team. We met the senior investigating officer, met the police search advisor on scene, and then we walked up the river and looked, and sort of a lot of it was shallow. So rather than put diving equipment on, it was more of a bathoscope search in line. Very slow, methodical search. We were looking for keys, we were looking for clothing, we were looking for a mobile phone, a couple of bunches of keys and a mobile phone. I think within 2 hours, we'd located all the evidence on this particular job, and she was charged, I believe, that afternoon through that evidence that we located quickly. And it was just used again. It gives the right equipment, the right expertise at that time quickly. And the police done a good job because they brought us in early, because all it needed was a heavy rain, and the rain could have washed the evidence away. So as you know, rivers can change overnight, and if you have so it can be that split decision to go, oh, we won't bother with the dive team, we'll bring them in a couple of days' time, and then nobody looks at the weather. The first thing I always do is look at the Met Office, so I can advise the police to say, you got heavy rain tonight, big storm, and that storm is going to raise the water levels, and we won't be able to operate because the water will be too murky and the evidence will get washed away. And that was so important that day to have that right. You know, we had clearer water than normal. It was shallow, yet within a few weeks we were there again, recovering the body further down of a dementia patient who got washed away in the water further down, where it turned into floodwater. So that same so-called stream turned into more of a raging current, and they searched for 3 days. They couldn't find her, and then we found her subsurface, lodged under what they call a strainer on the corner of a bend. So yeah, it was a sad. She got convicted. She got a sentence. I'm not sure how long she got, but it was a successful operation for us anyway. And again, bringing some form of closure to families. And a great job by Surrey Police.
And I know the picture on the left doesn't apply to this case, but picture on the right, is that the bathoscope there?
Yes, that is the search for Nigel Chapman. That is the actual, not Nigel Chapman, that's the search for the evidence on the night. That is the actual taken. And as you can see, it was during COVID because we got face masks on.
Right. And so what is the bathoscope? Is it just like a big glass?
Yeah, it's like an upturned bucket. So if you think about, if you go on holiday to a hot country that have a glass bottom boat, it's the same sort of thing. So it's a bucket. If you took a bucket and put a piece of glass, cut the bottom out and sealed a piece of glass in there and turn it upside down, you can see through the water. It's a bit like having a diving mask on. So if you look in the water normally without a mask, you can't see a lot. But put a diving mask on, you can see the bottom and it's crystal clear if the water's clear. And that was it. So yeah, it's a great. We carry 2 or 3 of them. They're absolutely brilliant pieces of equipment. They're cheap, but they help assist us on this type of operation.
Very simple, but very creative.
Simple but efficient. Yeah.
Peter and I now discuss Scottish serial killer Peter Tobin. Peter Tobin served a life sentence after being convicted of murdering 3 girls and young women between 1991 and 2006. His victims were 15-year-old Vicky Hamilton, 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, and 23-year-old Angelica Cluck. The bodies of Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol were found buried in the garden at Tobin's residence in Margate, while Angelica Cluck's body was concealed under the floor inside St. Patrick's Church, where Tobin was working at the time as a handyman. Tobin also served time for the assault and attempted murder of 2 14-year-old girls in 1993, was diagnosed as psychopath, and violently assaulted and tortured 3 women to whom he was married to between 1969 and 1993. I'll turn it over to Peter for more details on the case and how SGI got involved in one of the UK's most notorious serial murder investigations.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I mean, I was called again. I said I did a lot of work with the National Search Advisor, Mark Harrison. And Mark contacted me one day and said, I've got a really confidential case to discuss with you and need to send you some confidential files. You need to read them. We're going to carry out a search of a house in Bathgate in Scotland. And it's potential, a guy called Peter Tobin is his former house that he lived in a number of years earlier. We're looking for the body of Vicky Hamilton and potentially Dinah Nicole. Now, the operation was called, the main operation was being run by Operation Anagram. So what had happened, as you rightly said, the two little girls were sexually assaulted and tied up in a house on the south coast of England. And in them days, there was gas taps there on the old gas taps where you could put your heating on. And what he done, he tied them up and he turned the gas taps on, hoping they wouldn't get away. They got away. He got arrested, and he got charged with the assault on them. And I think he served, I believe it was 10 or 12 years out of 14, and he came out of jail. And he went up to Scotland. He got himself a job as a handyman in a church, and changed his name to Pat McLaughlin. And when he was there, he met a young girl called Angelica Kluke, who was there as a sort of she was a foreign girl, and I think she was Polish, but she was serving tea, she was helping in church. And this Tobin, he was totally evil, but he was also a charmer. And there was a number of rapes gone around in the 60s by someone they named as Bible John, but they never actually caught him. So Bible John was a rapist on the loose around, I think, Glasgow, and never got caught. Possibly that could have been him, and they believe it probably was. And anyway, he was a charming person to certain people. They didn't see what he was like. And anyway, after when he met this young girl, he went on to then murder her, stab her multiple times, and put her under the floor in the church in a trap door. Tobin went on the run. He got apprehended by the police, and Superintendent David Swindle put Operation Anagram together with Strathclyde Police. Now, there was another operation running alongside. They now started looking at different properties where Tobin lived, what areas geographically, where did he live? Because he's obviously he's attempted to kill two little girls. He's now murdered Angelica. And was there any more? Was he a serial killer? So then Operation Mahogany was put together, was to search his former homes, and this was from Lothian and Borders Police. So I got contacted by Mark, that we went up there, and our job was to completely search the whole of the house. The police were not conducting the search, we were, for the police. They would obviously do any blood forensics if there was any blood found, and things like that. But my job and my team's was to search the complete house, top to bottom, for any sign of a body or any other evidence. So we started the search of the gardens, and along in that we had to assist us. We had a forensic archaeologist and Strathclyde Police blood dogs, which is now Police Scotland. So Police Scotland was then Strathclyde Police, Northern Police, and Lothian and Borders Police. And now it's all under one force for Police Scotland. So we moved in. We were there for about a week, and working under Mark and a guy called Kenny is one of the sergeants. And I searched the back garden using ground penetrating radar and magnetometer, and found there was a large rockery at the top of the garden. Now, this rockery over the years got larger and larger, and I said it's always important to speak to people. So we spoke to the neighbour, and the old gentleman said, I remember Pete, as he called him, digging a huge hole at the top of the garden. And he said, what are you digging for? Australia, because it was well over 2 meters deep. He started making a sandpit for my grandson. So then what happened, or it could have been his son, it was either son or his grandson. So what happened then, a couple of days later, the hole was filled in. And he said, where's the hole? He said, oh, the social services told me to fill it in. And so the hole disappeared. And then over the years, the rockery got bigger and bigger and bigger. Tobin moved away some years later. He moved away from the area. But the key thing is here, this area, what no one realised straight away was Vicky Hamilton lived around the corner from Tobin's house. And the last time she was seen was at the bus stop in Bathgate, in this area. So we were looking now for a body in this garden. So anyway, the rockery was taken apart by the forensic archaeologist. The area was probed again for the Strathclyde human remains dogs. So they probed the ground, and the dog indicated, the first dog indicated on the ground where he put his nose down, and then they brought another dog in half an hour later, and the second dog indicated. So I run the ground radar over with my team. You can see me in the pictures where I'm using the radar over the area, and I detected a large area of disturbed ground, and there looked like an anomaly in it. So I asked the archaeologist to dig down, and she dug down all the way, and she followed the old hole, the outline of the original hole that was there, and got down to about 2.3 meters. And there was nothing in the hole, but the dogs had indicated taken a scent. So we carried on searching the garden, but she could see the original cut marks where the hole was dug. And I then carried on in the garden, and I finished the garden, went in the loft. I went in the kitchen, found a large cavity under the kitchen floor using the magnetometer, and that was drilled. We dug it out, got the dog in, the archaeologist to check it. There was nothing there. While I was doing the kitchen, searching the kitchen, there was my Robin and Aidan, my team members, were in the loft. And what they'd done, a long guy called Bernie, they completely stripped all the lagging out the loft, all the insulation was taken out piece by piece, gone through with metal detectors to make sure there was nothing in the lagging. That was all stored in large skips doored skips outside. And then suddenly I got a call, and he said, we found something. So I went into the loft, and there was the knife. The knife was hidden behind the rafters, and it was secreted. So what they did, they put it in a forensic tube, the actual knife. Now, it's interesting, conflicting stories here, which someone said before, that the police in the court papers said that the police officer located the knife. No, he didn't. Robin and Aidan located the knife. They passed it to the police officer, actually in a forensic tube. We found it in the because the police weren't searching the house. We were, handed it to a detective, and then it was taken away for urgent DNA analysis. And it came back really quickly. And on that knife was found the DNA of Vicky Hamilton. That knife, that one knife, that linked Tobin to the murder of Vicky. So it was absolutely crucial evidence and he then got charged with her murder. Whilst we were working there, it was a real good job for us. And I remember getting a nice letter from the chief constable for our work that we did up there. And then we were rushed down to Southsea on the south coast to another address that Tobin rented in another location. So again, a complete search of that house, along with body dogs from Martin Grimes. He was there. Mark Harrison, Professor Mark Harrison, and we'd done a complete, again, we mimicked what we did in Scotland, a complete search under the floorboards, and to see any sign of human remains. While we were there, while we were actually at this address, the police, Lucy Syburn, the forensic archaeologist, was searching the house in Margate, another former address of Tobin's. Anyway, in the garden, they found two concrete buried under the floor. Lucy and her colleagues excavated it, and the bodies of Vicky Hamilton and Diana Nicole was found encased in concrete in the back garden, dismembered. Very, very sad, but a great job, a fabulous police operation. I mean, David Swindle led his team, and he's got a lot of good podcasts out, David, and he'd done a
Mhm.
tour, so very experienced detective, and he led the criminal investigation along with all his officers. We just did the search part. On what we did, we all worked as a team to get the results, and it worked along, say, forensic archaeologists as well, and dog teams. So it was a horrible individual who's passed away a couple of years ago. But for all those families, at least it got some closure.
Yeah, absolutely. Any that resolution
Yeah,
can be so important.
yeah,
And I mean, you come off as in my discussions with you, as a very empathic person, and I feel like you have a lot of experience um, engaging and consoling with families. Not in every instance,
no,
every case you work, but when you do, I feel like you have a lot of experience there, and are very
thank you,
sensitive
thank
in
you.
those kind of situations.
A lot of drowning, mainly the drowning victims, where families are on scene and we recover a drowning victim, and that's where I have a lot of engagement with the families, which is particularly difficult because it's just happened. So that's quite difficult to deal with sometimes. But yeah, along with the police as well, who have to deliver the messages.
I can imagine. I mean, that seems like quite the operation when the remains of the two girls were found.
Yeah.
Was Did police suspect that their bodies were on that property, or what, or was it just being searched
Yeah.
in case they were? Or maybe you can't say, but
Well, no, I can. I mean, it's all gone to court now. I mean, it was an interesting one, but the intelligence was his MO was burying. He was known to bury things, and from the previous hole that he dug. And it's so interesting that when the police were down at Margate in Kent, that he told the neighbour exactly the same thing. So he dug a huge hole in the back garden, and he told them that the social services told him to fill the hole in. And they thought Vicky was in Scotland, but what had happened, he murdered Vicky, and we believe that Vicky had been buried in the hole at the top of the garden, the one that had been disturbed. He had buried her there for a number of months. He then moved house. He then wanted to take her remains with him, so in case somebody else dug her up. And then he put her in his van, wrapped in plastic, because she was found buried in plastic. She was actually sadly dismembered. And she was taken down to Margate, and Diana Nicole was hitchhiking a lift up near Reigate Hill in Surrey. Got into a car with the wrong person, with Tobin, with her boyfriend, dropped the boyfriend off early, and Tobin proceeded to murder her, and then buried her in his garden in Kent as well. So the pair of them were buried encased in concrete. And Lucy's a good friend of mine, the archaeologist. So I've seen the pictures; they're absolutely horrific, of where they done the excavation, and that takes a certain dedication and mind to deal with that sort of thing as well. Horrendous. But anyway, it's like I said, it's closure. Some I would say not total closure, some form of closure for the family,
at least they know what happened,
and
right?
they can lay them to rest.
Exactly.
And that's it. Yeah.
Thank you for joining Peter and I as we discussed forensic search operations. In part 3, Peter and I will talk about the Nicola Bully investigation, its shortcomings, SGI's involvement, and the fallout. Peter is also going to share never before seen video footage with us to support his findings and claims in that investigation. Please stay tuned and follow me on all my socials for the release of part 3. Next week on the Geographic Profiler, we head back to the US for a completely different look at behavioral analysis with Tim Papa. Tim is a former FBI profiler who specializes in cyber profiling and behavioral content creation. Tim also assisted the family of Rachel Morin, who was attacked and murdered while jogging in Bel Air, Maryland on August 5th, 2023. Tim is going to share with us his experience working with the family, how he developed the behavioral content videos, and his thoughts on the suspect, Victor Martinez Hernandez, as the trial proceeds. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Find more great episodes on Surviving the Survivor's second channel, True Crime Talk. Thank you for watching and listening. This is the Geographic Profiler, and I am Douglas MacGregor.